Hello, welcome to Media Snack live from New York.
Greetings from London.
So we've got a really good one today.
Yep.
We're talking about client agency relationships, critical thing, which relates to last week's episode. If you saw last week, we were talking about what the priorities are for a media director in Q1. And the answer, of course, is all about talent and the relationship with the agency. We've been thinking about what really goes into making a really good client agency relationship. So we'll give you things that you need to know to understand how to invest in really good relationships. And as always, David will come with 3 great tips for you to start thinking about. So if you stay till the end, you'll learn hopefully some good little tips and tricks, all coming up on today's Media Snack. Welcome to Media Snack, the live weekly show where we unpack the important questions that you will have about media, agencies, marketing, and more. If you're new to the channel, it's great to have you join us. Subscribe below to get alerts of all upcoming weekly episodes. Right then, as usual, we're streaming live. So remember, you can leave comments live in the show. We'll keep an eye on those. So if you want to build on this, share your examples, share your experiences, have questions that you want us to address in the show, then we certainly can do that. Let me just close this down. Right, so let's think about the question of the week.
The question of the week: what makes a winning client agency relationship?
Very good. Question. Okay, I'm going to start on the other side of that question because I think it's just helpful to kind of all of us to remind ourselves sometimes where they just don't work. Because I think in understanding where, and if we can all recognize some of these areas where it falls down sometimes, then it makes more sense than to think about the areas that you, on both sides, need to be investing to make these the most productive that they can be. And we always say, great client behavior, great agency behavior makes for better results. And so it's something worth investing in. Don't take it for granted. Lots of people in the industry kind of refer to it like it's a long-term relationship. It should be a long-term relationship, very invested in each other's success. And there's so much money at stake. There's so much money involved, and there's so much potential and opportunity at stake here that you often have, client and agency relationships, which can be very large companies of their own, really meeting together with very few people that have to collaborate well. And so you're investing in the relationship not just as individuals, but as your corporations or as your businesses. It's really important that you take some time to invest and do that right. So where don't they work? In those examples where they don't work, they typically fall into a kind of Venn diagram, of some overlapping issues. So the first thing that we see where it's not working is what we might call a power imbalance. And typically, it's not always the case, but it's typically where you have an agency and a slightly more subservient relationship, right? And a dominant client, but it can happen the other way around. And I'll give you some examples of where we've seen that happen another way around. We spend a lot of time with media directors. David, you were a media director at some big brands in previous life. You don't want your agency just to be saying yes the whole time. You contract on a long-term basis, typically with your agencies. It could be many, many years that you have this relationship. They are not there just to say yes and take instruction. And we see, many examples over the years of agencies that have slightly perhaps fallen into that trap. And the responsibility sits on both sides. Okay, it's the attitude of the client, of the marketer. Often, sometimes some people, think of their agency as, as a resource that's just to do their bidding. And the agency very quickly falls into that trap of just, turning up and taking instruction. And that is something which festers. That power imbalance is not healthy in a client agency relationship. The best ones are where you really see each other as kind of critical strategic partners. Exactly. It makes the relationship very tactical and not strategic. Media directors, we hear them say, because they say it to us as consultants, maybe we have a privilege to be more, maybe sometimes more of that kind of peer relationship, but they say, tell us what not to do. I love that when someone says that, because that means that they're really thinking about strategic priorities. The agency, you cannot sit back and wait for instruction. Don't accept a bad brief, make it better, make your client better. It's your responsibility. So that's one area where sometimes these things don't work. Maybe a cause of that symptom is lack of clarity around goals and objectives, not having really agreed what success looks like. We've heard, I don't know how many times over the last decade, a client team, make criticism of an agency. And when we ask them their perspective on the agency, they'll say things like, oh, maybe they're not innovative enough, or we're not sure that they kind of come with the best creative ideas. And then we say, like, show us the scope of work, show us what you've actually asked them to do. And it says, we're retaining your agency for media planning and buying services, right? And it doesn't detail those kind of ththings that you want to see. It doesn't detail the kind of reporting that you want from an agency. And then, you hear people moan, they're not reporting well enough. Well, look, the scope of work is really where this stuff all lies. I mean, what you put in the scope of work, what you ask your agency to do is really critical. Not just a big laundry list of menu items, but also describe the relationship. If you go to the ANA, go to the 4As, go to your trade bodies, they have really good resources to help you to kind of describe the relationship that you want. We often do that. We write these within scopes of work. It's good to have some agreed principles, some rules of engagement, things like that you can just agree on, and that gives you the foundation to maybe avoid some of those things. And the third area of where it sometimes goes wrong is where small things are allowed to fester. You don't have a forum, a proper forum, in order to be able to invest in that relationship. Okay, you might do an annual review, but you really need to do more of that. And again, we spend a lot of time investing in these relationships and really seeing it from both sides. It's really important that we're not there always wholly representing the marketer. We're sympathetic and we understand the challenges in the agency. And sometimes it's helpful to have us there to kind of help rebalance that. Have those forums. There needs to be informal forums, like get to know your agency, right? Know your agency, and know your client, really important. But also those formal forums where you can actually discuss like real operational priorities. So those are where it doesn't work. So what makes the great ones great? And I know this is probably overlapping with some of your tips, but so I don't want to steal thunder there. But it's the boring stuff. Unfortunately, it's the really boring stuff which has to be the foundation for success. It's the scope of work. It's the contract. It's fair remuneration terms. Clear instructions, good quality briefing. You've got to be able to do those basics, because that just gives the agency a chance to be a peer and a partner to you. Really important. And so if you haven't got those things in place, good quality contract, really clear scope of work, rules of engagement, expectations, describe the relationship that you want to have, pay the agency fairly for for the work that they're doing. That's the good start. Secondly, create those kind of top to top forums. Well, that's what we see in really good, successful agency client relationships, is that they have these both informal opportunities, as an account lead and the agency side, know your client, right? You've got to have some time where you can kind of get to know each other, but also have these formal forums. With the many advertisers, we do either quarterly or half-yearly business reviews, and that's looking end-to-end on both sides of how things are working and provide an independent and objective view to prioritize those things that need attention, which is really important. So you've got to keep working at it. And we would encourage, the third thing there really, what makes them great, is that there is real confident leadership on the agency side. Do not let your teams fall into the habit. Right. And I'm sure we've all seen that. I used to kind of comment on this being in the agency meetings, like your agency turns up, everybody opens their book, gets their pen ready to take instruction. Like, that's not, as a client, what you want to see every day. Okay. It's helpful that the agency is listening, but you don't want that kind of dynamic where they're just waiting for you to give them the answer or give them direction, very, very important. And I think, we're seeing some symptoms of some of these things. People have said the in-housing trend is a reaction to the client agency relationship. Maybe that might be true. Maybe it's driven by some kind of frustration amongst marketers. for not having a strong enough agency relationship. One that's if it becomes too transactional and too tactical, it's maybe easier for the marketer to start thinking, well, I'm just basically giving instruction.
Yeah.
I could hire these people and have them internally, and I could do all this stuff myself. So to be a real true strategic partner, to be a peer, to be a challenger, is a great dynamic. And that to me is a real secret of a great client agency relationship, where we see them working really well.
Yeah.
Okay. So
good.
Give us some tips then. So if you're client or you're leading an agency.
Well, I mean, the first thing I think to say is that I don't think there has ever been a greater appetite or need for a real partnership between kind of brands and their agency partners. We've been talking about partnerships for years, but actually now is when brands most need their agencies to step into that partnership role. And actually that's when agencies really want to kind of embrace that partnership. And I was very lucky, and I worked with two brands that always saw their agencies as deep partners. And I now work with many media directors that are trying to cultivate that. And I think there are 4 key themes that are consistent in all of those really positive examples. And the first one is sharing success, both parties being very open and sharing what personal and professional success looks like. The best question, Tom, that was ever asked of me when I was on the brand side was when I was at Nike, my first 2 weeks at Nike. My account leader at the media agency came over for a meeting to Amsterdam, and he asked me this question. To this day, I think it's genius. One of the best questions ever asked to me in my professional life. He said, "What kind of media leader do you want to be?" And I thought it was slightly peculiar at the time. I didn't quite understand what he was asking, but he needed to understand what my motivations were as a media leader very early on. Did I want an easy life? Did I want to, operate a 9 to 5? They were then going to do all the heavy lifting. Did I want fame and celebrity? Was he going to be expected to put me on all the speaker platforms and make me win awards? Or was I looking for progression within the organization to make me a marketing director? That's what he was looking for. He wanted to understand what my deep-rooted professional ambitions were. And this media leader then was going to try and engineer and orchestrate his agency resources to enable that to happen over and above the great work that they were going to do. And I thought that was just so clever. Understanding what my motivations and requirements were was going to enable him to course correct the relationship that we have or had in order to kind of fulfill that. So don't ever be afraid of kind of sharing what success is. And also as an agency leader, share with your brand leader what success to you and your organization will look like. That's the first thing. Yeah. The second thing, go on.
No, I was going to say, because I think that's it's such a good distinction, which I can remember being on the agency side. You just assume that all advertisers are kind of the same. You assume that all the motivations of the individuals, you assume that the motivations of a media director are the same, but they're not. We've learned again and again, really different, and they can be as distinct as what you described. But even the organization itself, brands, particularly when we think about media, their attitude and objectives in media are different. You got to know that. You have to understand that to service the business well.
The foundations of any kind of partnership, understand what success means and is translated to within that organization. So that's the first thing. The second thing we mentioned is remuneration. Just boring, but pay your agencies fairly. Make sure that it's equitable. Make sure that you have a proportion of that remuneration that is linked some way to value generation. The agencies want it. They want to be seen as partners. They don't want to be seen as executional providers. They want to be seen as partners. So make sure that the remuneration structure is right. The third thing is behaviors. Every strong client agency relationship that I've ever seen, either been part of or witnessed from the outside, has the fundamentals around good behaviors. And those behaviors, frankly, start at the brand side. So be respectful, be inclusive, invest time properly on briefing. Make sure that if you're asking the agencies, you mentioned before, the innovation thing, they don't bring me any innovation. Normally, it's because you haven't embraced innovation for 3 years and the innovation's going elsewhere. So embrace great ideas, embrace creativity, champion your agency internally. Okay, they'll want to hear that. So it's about behaviors. If you get the behaviors right, then you can engineer an operating structure on the agency side that is focused on your objectives and perhaps not theirs. And then the fourth thing is have regular forums where you can course correct. You mentioned QBRs, so quarterly business reviews, half yearly reviews. In many cases, the only time that a brand and an agency interact in terms of performance is at the very end of the year. That's way too late. Do it regularly so that you can help together course correct that relationship. Now, the truth of the matter is that, you know, putting aside the commercial demands of pitches, right, in media, and the market has been addicted for the last 10, 15 years to hard savings every 3 to 5 years. Putting aside all of those things, and those things are going to be diminishing with time. It's very rare that a relationship should get so toxic so quickly that the only alternative is to shift out from a different agency. And where that relationship has become toxic is because nobody has had the presence or the consideration to begin to nip those issues in the bud. So when they are small little problems, get those corrected and they don't become big problems. So those are the kind of the four areas that I would encourage media leaders and their agency counterparts to at least consider as they build these partnerships moving forward.
Yeah, really good. We talk a lot with advertisers about being a priority client. And that's our effort and our way of trying to encourage those good behaviors, right?
Yeah.
Because as an advertiser, the assumption is there's always the biggest advertisers that get the most attention from the agency. And that's to somewhat the extent true, in the sense that, you know, the really mass advertisers, particularly when agencies were earning commission, were really the, you know, where they made their money, obviously. However, that's over the last 5 or more years, there's a slight rebalancing of that. And what we hear from agency leadership is that, yeah, scale is interesting, of course, and they still, you know, want to win all those kind of big clients and those big high profile clients. But it's the what they call the client behavior that has such a powerful measure and such a powerful impact on that client's kind of status within an agency. And whether they admit it or not, all agency leadership, all agency CEOs have in their mind, they could write down in order their most important clients. Okay.
Exactly right.
And they're not going to be from biggest to smallest. They're going to be from the best to the worst, right? Which ones do they really want to keep? Which ones are they, you know, frankly, not fussed too much about? You obviously don't want to be down the bottom of that, bottom of that list, because what you'll get is you'll just get less attention from the client. You'll get less attention from the agency. You know, less people will want to work on it. The quality of talent will diminish. You know, and you won't get these really important things like these innovation first looks. You know, it's such a dynamic, innovative, constantly changing marketplace. If you're a client of an agency and they're not knocking on your door, bringing you good ideas, it might be that they're actually being given to somebody else. That's, as you said, that's the thing. So just think about where, you know, your priority status with an agency. It sometimes takes a little bit more humility on the client side, because you have to think, oh, hang on a minute, you know, I should be thinking about how prioritized you are as an agency in my kind of ecosystem. But you've got to think, agencies, they have favorites. They do have favorites. They have better clients.
Absolutely.
Your behavior, your setup, the way that you engage with the agency, the way that you treat them has a huge impact on that. And you'll see the value or not come from that, because, you know, it's a people business and requires talent and energy. And if the agency leadership is not putting talent and energy into your business, it's probably as a result of the way that they view you as a client, which is a shame. Which is why, you know, increasingly we're looking, as David, as you said, beyond the pitch, looking at how we invest in relationships, how we help both clients and agencies invest in really long-term, productive, sustainable relationships. It's where we really all need to put our energies. So hopefully some of these tips have been useful to you. I said I'd give some examples. There are examples of, you know, where the agency has the power imbalance. Okay, we've seen some big examples of some big global advertisers that have, you know, consolidates everything into one agency, been with that agency maybe a long time, and they kind of, we observe the people internally are not really that able to make decisions. The agency is making a lot of decisions and kind of aligning the client to the way that they think that they should go. that happens. That's been a couple of extreme examples of that. It really diminishes the influence of the advertiser, and therefore, perhaps as a result, their marketing is not as good.
Yeah.
We've seen some clients where they're almost embarrassed to have an agency. There seems a culture internally where it seems maybe as a weakness to kind of bring an agency in to help you with things. We've seen examples of agency logos being taken off slides and things being presented internally as their own work, which is, cheeky, but I think it's symptomatic of a culture where, the agency is never going to be seen as a kind of really embedded strategic partner to that business growth. So anyway, we've got many, many examples. If we can help you explore any of these areas, we'd love to do that.
Very true.
We could talk about this for a long time. Anything else to add before we wrap? No,
I think that's good. Just behave well and, embrace the partnership. That's how media grows.
Yeah, very good. Tell us what you think. Leave a comment down below, or we post this across different social platforms. We'd love to get you involved in the debate. Tell us questions that you'd like us to cover in future shows. If you like this episode, please give it a thumbs up, because it helps people like you find this channel. Yeah. And we want more people into these debates. But that's all for Media Snack this week. Thank you for watching.
See you next time.
Media Snack is brought to you each week by ID Comms, the award-winning growth consultancy specializing in media. We help advertisers on a life cycle to growth in 3 service areas: operations, partnerships, and optimization, that transform your media investments into real company growth. Whether you're planning an agency pitch, upgrading your media organization, want to learn new best practice, or simply get better performance from your media investments, you can find out more at idcomms.com/growth.